Hello and welcome to the March Prestige Global Meeting Sources Education Webinar Series, where we explore topics to empower you with knowledge and tools to thrive in your career and your life. I'm your host, Sasha Andreev, and today we're exploring an incredibly interesting topic, designing inclusive events with mindful drinking lens. Now, if this is your very first time here, we're very happy to have you. And if you've been here before, welcome back. We are so glad that you are here. Now, here at Prestige, we provide full service meetings and event support for event planners. We make our clients' lives easier with site selection, event logistics, housing, flight management, creative marketing, and personalized on-site support. We collaborate with our global network of hospitality partners, all for your success. Now, part of our mission is to keep you informed and empowered, and that is how this webinar series was born. Every month, we invite guests from our vast network to share their expertise on subjects that affect your professional and, yes, sometimes even your personal lives. And that probably couldn't be more true than with this month's topic and our very special guest, Jen Veralle, founder of the Mindful Drinking Movement. Now, a little bit about Jen. Jen is an event experience strategist, founder of the marketing consulting firm SparkTrack. She's a writer and, of course, the founder of the Mindful Drinking Movement, which is an initiative to connect, collaborate, and share resources to advance zero-proof options, experiences, and social spaces. Jen is also a contributor and voice on Cadre.io, a mental health and wellness app platform where she hosts Sober Not Somber Hour weekly. She's a certified life and recovery coach via the International Association of Professional Recovery Coaches. And on top of all of that, her 2023 TEDx talk, Why We Should Rethink Drinking Culture, has amassed an impressive 47,000 views. So I would love to welcome Jen to our webinar. Hello, Jen.
Hello there. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that enthusiastic introduction, Sasha. I'm going to have to replay that. That was amazing.
Well, good. That's what we try to do here at our webinars. Now, I know that you speak very openly about your own experiences with alcohol misuse, and I'm curious how you decided to channel your personal journey of living an alcohol-free lifestyle into becoming an advocate and creator of professional alcohol-free experiences.
Yeah, love to start there because I have a background in corporate. For 2 decades, I was in the space of event planning and saw firsthand how that contributed to my own personal alcohol misuse. And at about age 40, I experienced a lot of burnout due to extreme alcohol misuse and went to find a way to figure out a sober lifestyle. And that's what I've been doing for the last 11 years, have an alcohol-free lifestyle, and noticed that in events and social spaces I'm in right now, they're still not meeting the needs of myself and others who just choose to not drink for whatever reason.
Right. And then, of course, you founded the Mindful Drinking Movement, which is this initiative that has this advisory board that helps you promote these sort of sober or non-alcoholic spaces. What made you realize that the events industry specifically needed this lens?
Yeah, there's a lot of work being done to bring in, let's say, non-alcoholic bars to events and be able to serve a tactical, solution to this. But not a lot of people were talking about the cultural shift that is necessary to go along with giving people permission to make that option. So I would see this everywhere where non-alcoholic options were available, but people just weren't feeling empowered to make those choices. So in corporate spaces, I'm not so much in private events, but more of the corporate and event planner spaces where I love to make an impact.
Awesome. Well, I think all of us here, because we have a ton of people watching, and I myself am interested to hear what you have to say. So before I let you get on with your presentation, I just want to give a quick reminder to all of our viewers that if you've got a question during the presentation, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen that you can use to submit your question, and we will address them in the Q&A after the presentation. The chat window is also open, so you can use it to interact with Jen. She might be posing some questions and looking for some feedback as she speaks. And of course, for those folks that maybe want to watch this back later, if you want to share this presentation with somebody who couldn't make it, we record all of our webinars and make them available for viewing on the Prestige Global Meeting Source YouTube channel, so you can always reference it there. So Jen, the floor, or rather the screen, is all yours.
All right. Wonderful. Just a quick check to make sure you're seeing it.
We are.
Great. So Sasha shared my bio. I love to connect on LinkedIn. I have a lot of content on LinkedIn related to all of this and some live shares. So please join me over there, Jen Veralle. So in addition to talking a little bit with you all about my story, I did want to highlight some of the ways that I came to this work. 3 years ago, founded Sauna and Sobriety, and that is about modeling alcohol-free adult social experiences that inspire connections. And then, as Sasha mentioned, my TEDx talk came from a perspective of, if you remember Sober Curious, the Sober Curious movement, that was 8 years ago now. That was 2018, and here we are in 2026. So the talk still feels relevant because it's not necessarily about my sober journey, but it is about inviting people in to rethink how alcohol is showing up in society. So that's for everyone. And then finally, the mindful drinking movement, which has been where I'm digging in over the last year and a half into the societal shifts in drinking culture. So this includes workplace events where I'm continually seeing some misses and gaps at events in terms of how we can address this shifting culture. So I'm excited to share that with you all today. So I always like to kind of review an agenda because we're going to hit all these topics, but I want it to be more in a conversational way and to invite you in to be posing questions in the Q&A, and then I'll also ask for some insight on in the chat. So we're going to cover what is mindful drinking. We're going to look at the growing demand for elevated non-alcoholic options. And there are gaps in the industry, let me tell you. So event planning services and hospitality, how does that connect to the non-alcoholic space? And then we're going to talk about some solutions, and really with the lens of how can that be a competitive advantage to get ahead of these trends and really be mindful, not necessarily just about offering NA options, but really through the lens of inclusivity, because I think that drives and empowers more people to connect to this initiative. And then finally, how can you become an advocate? There are so many barriers, so I want to support everyone personally who wants to become an advocate in whatever space they're in. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some specific offerings that you as event planners can implement, and I have a ton of resources also to share. So the mindful drinking movement, as I was just mentioning, the Sober Curious movement's been out there now for 8 years. And I look at Sober Curious as more of people starting to explore a personal relationship with alcohol. And my work, again, is really in the cultural and societal and environmental spaces that I personally felt did not support me when I was trying to make sober choices, especially in early sobriety. It's really tough. It's really tough. So the movement is really this cultural shift that celebrates a lifestyle choice focused on choosing not to drink alcoholic beverages on occasion or not at all. So that's important because this isn't about prohibition or all of these things that feel restrictive. This to me is, again, the word celebrated. Like we get to make these choices. We get to be present when we have permission to not drink. So I just want to frame that up because the one thing we don't want to do is come from a lens of shame. So thinking about it in terms of, yeah, of course, everyone has these preconceived notions about how alcohol shows up, but we can all just benefit from being more open about what this could mean for not only ourselves and our personal lives, but the professional, services area and the clients you're serving. And then I just want to touch on who is actually involved in this industry. So product makers, after kind of coming out of COVID, I could not believe the amount of non-alcoholic products that were available. And this to me was the heart of my TEDx talk, where I had been asking for 13 years, my, first trying to get sober 13 years ago, there was nothing. And now, 11 some years ago, even at the start of my sober journey, there really wasn't. But in the last 4 to 5 years, we have a lot of product makers that are in the industry making amazing beverages. So it's also comprised of owners of alcohol-free brick and mortar establishments, restaurants, bars, and bottle shops, sober coaches, quit lit authors, sober influencers, workplace well-being and cultural leaders and speakers like myself who come in and facilitate conversations in the workplace. And then also non-alcoholic beverage associations and publications, which help us set the standards of how non-alcoholic beverages are categorized. And that is the Wild West. So that's another deep dive conversation we can have one-on-one if you're interested. Then I want to move to this general concept. And when I think of event planners in all of the range and the spectrum of clients you serve, understanding that everyone has a relationship with alcohol, everyone deserves permission to have a choice. So this chart only identifies 5 areas from the left on the spectrum to the right. So I want to go through this quickly and actually ask, in your client types and who you serve, where might these areas, like where do you think your clients, the majority of them are right now, if you had to guess? If you just place that in the chat, we can check that later and Sasha can keep me informed. But the recovery or sober necessary, I would also put the category of alcoholic. So obviously you have people coming to your events that are in active addiction. I call myself sober necessary. I have also called myself an alcoholic when I was early in sobriety, trying to understand the labels around it. So I chose sober necessary because I thought it was a conversation starter to be able to invite more people into a conversation of why I choose not to drink. There's a gray area drinker who might be questioning their relationship. There's the sober curious, sort of in the middle, who are wondering about exploring moderation, but maybe don't have the confidence to order a non-alcoholic beverage at your event. They need to be invited in for sure. And there's also the casual social drinker who drinks occasionally with intention. So think about a gala or a celebration. Maybe this person has a glass of wine with dinner and then switches to non-alcoholic. And finally, you have the people way on the right who just choose not to drink for whatever reason. And this is increasing exponentially. So this is for religious reasons, health reasons, productivity, showing up in life. So this is the spectrum. This is the spectrum. And understanding that as an event planner, that people are going to come to these experiences with preferences and also a backstory of why. So then I want to get into the growing demand for NA. There definitely are more options. I'm seeing these at events, but it's a cultural shift. Again, drinking behavior and preferences, especially from Gen Z, they are driving this. But we are dealing at events with, people over the course of 5 different generations, and each generation has some tendencies and some either resistance or acceptance to how this trend is impacting them. I believe the leading event companies will guide their clients in aligning the events in relevant cultural and tactical ways. And then I also think about, you as event planners, companies, teams, and individuals, if you can be knowledgeable and have awareness of this movement and all the nuances, which are a lot steeped in the cultural piece, you can increase your client satisfaction, get inclusivity efforts and results while you're innovating, attracting forward-thinking clients, and staying ahead of these trends. So I love that. The demand is happening. Then I want to dive in a little bit to addressing this gap. So, or gaps, many of them actually. And this is really from my 4 years of being in this space. And this is specific, what I want to share with you is specific to the event planning services and hospitality, and really what's shifted almost really over the last 5 years. So I believe the gaps exist in understanding the new technology, flavor profiles, and ingredients for NA. The gaps exist in understanding what consumers actually want and their preferences. Did you know among adults in the 18 to 34 category, only 50% drink right now? How does it impact who you're serving? How to curate an A and NA integrated menu. So I use that. That means alcohol and non-alcohol are non-alcoholic to me. Understanding all the positive reasons to incorporate NA. Many people don't understand. I've got a list of at least 7 compelling reasons. And then the importance of the culture and setting the tone for events. So many companies that I've talked to that sort of have NA on a menu or at their event, they aren't seeing the traction, but I also look at those and recognize there's just a gap in how people are given permission and how it's served. So I'll get into a little more detail on that. And so really the solution in this competitive advantage is just increasing your knowledge. And this is from a professional standpoint, but also because alcohol is so personal for everyone, whether you drink or not, we all have experiences around it. So to understand how those connect and be open to learning more about this. And then also just really being of the mindset of providing excellence in the curated non-alcoholic offerings. Not easy to do. Or I can help you do that. And I believe it's easy, but not always, there's not a roadmap for a lot of people. So addressing the gap, I thought this would be a really interesting starting slide to sort of share with you as event planners, the share of the total beverage spend at events by percentage. So this covers a 5-year gap from 2020 to 2025. And I think the point here is just to show you that the preferences are going to more non-alcoholic beverages. In 2025, we see 55% of event attendees really in the non-alcoholic space. And again, this includes like events that happen during the day. This is all events across the spectrum. But I bet if you looked at happy hours and galas, those numbers would be much inflated on the alcohol side right now. So just knowing that we're seeing these trends shift and being able to understand where people are at. These stats on the right, I want to touch on quickly. 46% of US adults are saying, we don't drink. This was an important thing that happened in July of 2025 with the Gallup poll, and it's just unheard of almost. And I think there are a lot of things that impact that number, but that's a very high number, and a look at people's preferences and how they've changed so quickly. There's also a 22% year-over-year growth in the NA beer and wine and spirits category. The options are getting much better. And then also a third of your event attendees don't drink. What do you guys think about these stats? Will you place something in the chat if you've got a comment, or did any of these surprise you, or some of them are like, yeah, I'm starting to see that. I'd be curious. And then 40% of Americans plan to drink less. So I want to point out here that I think with the NA offerings and offering like I'm going to suggest we do on the elevated side, we're going to see people actually having more permission to choose those. So I think we're going to see more of the NA beverage preferences going up even higher because it has to do with culture, right? I really loved taking a deep dive on these stats, and I have so many more from the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association that I'd be happy to share with you all. I do want to address this gap in terms of the NA menu. If you watch my TED talk, I talk about scrolling for options and looking for options on the menu and not being able really to discern any good NA products or what's actually in the product. So on the left, I have a non-integrated alcohol and non-alcoholic menu example. So in that space, you're going to see the soda, juice, and water, and sort of, go over there and get your NA. Maybe it's even self-serve. Secondly, no signage. Guests have to ask, what's available? I'm always asking, what do you have for non-alcoholic options? It's like on repeat. Mocktail is listed as an afterthought. I also want to call out the use of the word mocktail. I use non-alcoholic beverage. I think it's a more sophisticated term. However, the general public right now tends to connect with mocktail, But I will say, to me, as someone in recovery, I don't even want something that mimics alcohol. I want a completely new, really celebrated adult beverage. So that's why I choose that term. We also see there's maybe only one option, like a Diet Coke or sparkling water. The other last 2 points, the bar staff is completely unsure what even exists. I can't tell you how many times that happens to me. And then guests feel conspicuous about ordering something that's non-alcoholic. They're unsure, and the bartender can, whomever is like serving that interaction can go such a long way in building confidence in ordering NA beverages. So on the right is the fully integrated A and NA menu. So the NA options are given this equal space and celebration and light around them that really draws attention and the idea of celebration. The named menu is spirited or free spirited, something more exciting than non-alcoholic beverages, perhaps. And then the categories and the offerings in here are botanical spritzes, some sparkling NA wines, adaptogens, things that are low in calories, lower in sugar, and aren't, just sort of taking the alcohol out of your featured cocktail. And then we're also mirroring the presentation. They get glassware, garnishes, and also being able to be served with some enthusiasm. And the staff is trained on how to do this. And finally, the access is really easy. You don't need to apologize or have someone explain what's in the beverage. Someone can read it. And just to note, a non-alcoholic beverage is 0.5 or less of alcohol, ABV by volume. Some people actually look for 0.0. So just to be aware of how important it is on a menu to fully disclose ingredients and the percentage of alcohol. So the difference isn't in just what you serve, it's how it's offered. So that was a little bit about just all the gaps that I'm seeing and where improvement can be made. And this idea of becoming an advocate, I call myself an NA advocate. I mean, I was that 5+ years ago as I was starting to figure out the conversation in this space, and mostly have run into a lot of barriers. I call it, the resistance when I mention it, and people are, crossed arms, sort of, well, we've always had alcohol. Why wouldn't we continue that? So the barriers for me, and the ones that I want to share with you to be aware of, are just access to products. So this is on like a professional level where you're looking at things like food and beverage minimums, things that are integrated in the event system that are built into the structure for profit. Contracts with vendors who provide alcohol can have limited access, or there's not really a willingness to incorporate the NA beverages because it's something new and something they don't understand. Second barrier, I would say, is awareness challenges. Clients or partners you work with may not have the cultural awareness of inclusivity. So what is your role in sort of presenting that early on for your clients to understand the importance of A and NA offerings? And then also just what is the cultural readiness of your client? And that's what I actually love to help event planners with, is determining what's going to be a good conversation to have with those clients, and then what does the integration look like. Some clients might be completely non-alcoholic, and it aligns with their vision and mission. Others might be sort of dipping their toe into what does it look like to have more NA options, and start to maybe shift culture and conversation. Because the last point here, alcohol is celebration, gathering, and reward. It is currently still celebrated when it comes to gatherings of all types. And there is this deep-seated belief that it needs to be there to draw attendees. I experienced this quite a bit, and I want to challenge those notions. So by becoming an advocate and understanding these things, you can be prepped to not only look at it in your personal life and experiences, but to figure out how then to translate that for your clients. And then I would love to share more in depth. We've got just a half an hour for me to share, but in general, I will touch on all of these 7 reasons. I call them the 7 compelling reasons. I co-created this while I was with Zero Proof Collective for some years ago, and it still rings true. So reason number 1, health and wellness. And yeah, I keep forgetting, you guys can add to the chat or comments. Please do. I'm not seeing them all right now because I want to get through the info. But if any of these you have questions about or they resonate with you, number one, health and wellness. So once you understand how alcohol is ethanol, it's a poison. You're putting this in your body. This will impact your attendees and how they interact in the environment of your event. And many people want to make healthier choices. So knowing that health and wellness and what you are doing as an event host can contribute to someone's health and wellness is pretty incredible. You can help them stay on track. Safety and liability. This is one where I think about galas and 4-day conferences in Las Vegas. Like there are so many safety and liability issues that come along with plying your employees or attendees with drinks. And what's astounding to me is I still see legal at companies in all of these like post-event fallout things happening from alcohol misuse or conduct that companies are still willing to deal with and acknowledge. And by offering a non-alcoholic bar or taking alcohol out of the equation, you can increase your guest safety and liability. And that also has things that fall under that, like offering transportation, all sorts of things to ensure your employees and event attendees' safety. Inclusivity. So this is the lens that we talk about. So the compelling reason there is, again, going back to that slide I shared with like the 5 different categories, but how many people, for whatever reason, fall into making different choices at any given moment in time that they're coming into your event. And the best way to be inclusive is to think about the offerings and the cultural experience around that. So very compelling reason to feel like you belong in a space. Number 4, equity. So a lot of times, and this is just also in my past experience, opportunities are sometimes had around the celebration of alcohol. So in order to be equitable as a company, not connecting alcohol and the celebration of it with upward mobility in the workplace or opportunities at events is a real issue. And this is maybe less for event planners with your clients, but this is a workplace issue and your clients are in workplace. Number 5, creativity and innovation. These non-alcoholic options are so like just mind-blowing in terms of like botanicals and spirits and flavor profiles people haven't experienced. And if you are an event planner in the event industry creating that for your clients, the innovation and the idea that you're looked to as doing something new is very rewarding. And then number 6, promoting mindfulness. This to me just shows people make better choices when they're not drinking in general. So being mindful of your choices. And then 7, finally, is this increased employee productivity. And this is more for workplace, but if you are hosting events for a workplace client, these are the relationships that often with excess alcohol misuse can be destroyed. So these are really important to think about, letting your clients know that this is why we serve NA. It allows people to connect in a more mindful way and set and stick to those professional boundaries. This is where a lot of like day after event shame comes in. And lastly, I want to touch on some of the language that I have experienced over the years, really setting the stage before an event. And this can be in use for a leader, an MC, or any host of an event. So for example, someone could say, or this could actually be in an email prior to the event for attendees in some shape or form. So you're welcoming people. You're saying, we want to acknowledge that we have a full beverage bar tonight. And you can use words like, we are making mindful drinking choices. Everyone's encouraged to do whatever they need to do in this space. Choose alcohol, switch to non-alcoholic. It's all going to be crafted with care, and you're going to have options. And then finally, the idea of being here as a team, like reminding them, why are we here? We're here to connect, learn, and celebrate. Underneath, the undertone is alcohol doesn't support that. And a reminder that the evening and whatever event is about being present with each other, saying, enjoy the evening at your own pace, and closing it out with the transportation idea. So you see kind of the 4 categories on the bottom that you can follow: naming the purpose, acknowledging all the options, and centering connection, and mentioning safe transportation. Oh gosh, it's hard to talk for a half an hour. I can't wait to hear all the questions. This is the last slide. So, in wrapping all of that up, hopefully giving you a lot of touch points, things to think about. The services that I like to talk about offering that connect with these are sourcing premium options. So I have a lot of new relationships and established relationships in the NA industry. I love to bring the best of the best to an event planner. And then I also do custom beverage programs. So being able to work with event planners to just present all the alcoholic and non-alcoholic options, even, creating some signature NA cocktails that align with the event theme goes a long way to making it celebratory. Love working with mixologists and then working with chefs to really amplify the culinary experience. When you think about it, the non-alcoholic products pair so well with food and culinary, and alcohol is actually poison. So the taste and the flavor profile can change that. So just to say that that's another kind of selling point, especially when these beverages are paired with food. And finally, training leadership and staff. Again, this is such a big one that I specifically am in the mindful drinking movement to elevate and be able to provide training and conversation around the language, product categories, and the cultural conversation. And that is kind of where I want to wrap it for now and open it up to some questions.
Well, thank you, Jen. This was so interesting, and I'm going to put us side by side here so they can see us both. And if you just remove your presentation, we can go full screen. We did have some questions come in, as well as some comments from the chat that I figured you might be interested in addressing. Obviously, people in the audience kind of covered the full gamut of the spectrum of from being sober curious to being a casual social drinker to being a non-drinker by choice. So you're definitely talking to the right crowd here. Nancy Irvine wrote that they have all options, but they're going more and more to non-drinker by choice. They've seen a 15% increase in the non-alcoholic drinks in 2 years at a predominantly male conference, which was kind of interesting. And by the way, I think your camera just switched.
Yep, there we go. I got it.
And then the kind of data that you're presenting definitely is something that a lot of people were picking up on. And regardless of generation, Jared Ellis Perez said that he's noticing that people are shifting to an NA lifestyle. The other comment that I thought was interesting is that they're seeing interesting to see these trends in real time. And Beth Wiederspiel says that they offer a signature cocktail along with a signature NA bev at every event, and they've been very well received. And actually, to bounce off of that, as you talk about having options for both A and NA, is there a certain proportion of one versus the other? Should there be equal amounts? Because obviously right now we still see more drinkers than non. I noticed that you speak of sort of almost integrating in a way where you're not calling it out, it's just there. But do you have any thoughts on sort of what are the proportions between the two kinds of options?
Yeah, sure do. I find so years ago, it would be like someone might have a non-alcoholic beer on the menu. What if I don't like beer? I feel like the standard is having at least one option in each of those categories, and the categories being a non-alcoholic beer and wine. So having a sparkling white and a red wine, wines come a long way in the NA industry, and then having that signature non-alcoholic cocktail. If you can hit those three categories and have an option, that's amazing. And obviously you could add to that, but I feel like because of the event structure, it might be a dinner, so wine is really what you want. So you can kind of pick and choose with that, but I think having several categories and varieties is great.
And have you found, and I know you mentioned that alcohol is a poison and you're mixing it with food,
Yeah.
but obviously the tradition of combining pairing a wine with food is still something that's very much part of our culture. So would you say that that would sort of the non-alcoholic wine options that are out there operate similarly to alcoholic wines in terms of pairing?
I think the wine industry is the toughest of these categories because just recently, unfortunately, I was served at a restaurant. I ordered a non-alcoholic wine. I was served an alcoholic wine. And that was a whole experience. But I was reminded that the taste of a non-alcoholic wine and an alcoholic wine is so vastly different, and people are still trying to compare them apples to apples. So I think actually when pairing with food, some of the botanicals and spirits that are available now, like shrubs, all of these other elixirs and things, actually are a very great complement to food versus trying to win over someone who has been a wine connoisseur and romanticized about wine with dinner for an entire life. So we're finding more success in just varying up the categories and being just aware of your audience.
Sure. Well, speaking of categories, we've had two different sort of similar questions come in. Lauren Goff asked, "Do you see CBD THC drinks becoming commonplace in this space? And our hotel is starting to offer that, and how can you touch upon that?"
Yeah, depending on the rules and regulations in the states and where events are offered, I've seen some bars now in Minneapolis here stop serving them because it's becoming complicated. I always start, especially if you are serving a professional audience, I would encourage people to start with no substances at all then on the NA menu and not get mired in the details between. People have the alcoholic option and the NA. Generally, people know how those things affect them, but you throw in all these other beverages and the non-mix of THC with alcohol, and then you find yourself sort of monitoring, and it could be a safety and liability issue. So many companies are choosing not to even go that route. And then I would just second that by saying, it's amazing that people think they need alcohol as a social lubricant, but I have seen it 20 minutes into any event, especially if these are professional people coming together to celebrate. You see the connections start to happen. 20 minutes in, you look around, everybody's engaged, everybody's talking, and it just isn't a thing. So, encouraging people just to experiment and notice those things first before adding additional substances to a menu.
Sure, that's an interesting point. And Doug Peterson asked if you could speak about adaptogens and their use.
Okay. Hi, Doug. Doug is like wonderful because he snaps NA menus from wherever he's at across the country and he'll send them to me. And I get so excited that they're out there. Adaptogens are in the space of, you know, you have to kind of align what's the purpose of your event. And then adaptogens are going to be other
And could you
categories.
define adaptogen? Because I don't know if everybody
Yeah.
knows what that means.
So these are things that are natural, like could be in like lion's mane, if you've heard of that, like a mushroom variety, and things that are added to beverages like THC, non-THC, but cannabis, all these other varieties that produce a calming effect or a heightened effect. Ashwagandha, thank you, Lauren. All of those things that produce some sort of effect that isn't detrimental, but gives some sort of effect for what you're going for an event. So I do less in this space again because my background is more in sobriety and non-alcoholic beverages. But the audience and people at events are definitely wanting these and experimenting with them.
Okay. And it's obviously something you can find on the aisle of a grocery store these days. You're
Yeah,
finding adaptogens, everything
right.
from chips to seltzers. So I'm
Mhm.
assuming that's probably a safer route than
Yeah,
perhaps mixing THC and alcohol, because that's essentially two different substances.
it is.
Um,
I think it's about clarity on a menu. Like if you're serving adaptogens, it's a whole explanation of what that is or
yeah.
types. Mhm.
We had a question come in based on something you mentioned earlier about accidentally being served an alcoholic drink instead of NA. Do you know if the legal liability would fall on the venue or the client if that were to happen in an event?
I don't, and I think it's situational, I would guess. In my particular, I've had several experiences like that over the years, and I think the server was not trained in how to respond to me. There's definitely, I would say, things that I could come back to that restaurant with after the fact, documenting what happened. Or there could be that the server handles it in such a way that it's not an issue, a non-issue. But what I would say in that case, and this is with the NA wine, bring out the bottle, show me the label, and pour it right on site. Like these are problems that could be solved for. And this waiter was sort of combative with me, like, oh no, the NA wines are really great these days. It's going to taste like an alcoholic wine. And I'm like, oh no, oh no. Like I felt the heat and the rush of, the alcohol. And I was like, no. And so there's definitely ways, and this is what I educate event planners on that experience and how to handle that with that particular person in the moment.
Got it. Well, speaking of sort of handling things, how do you respond to leaders who worry about bringing this up at an event? And will it make people feel called out or uncomfortable, whether you're sending that email or following that script, or even, bringing, that up sort of publicly, because there are varying degrees of sensitivity about it.
Yeah, I call it like a social landmine. And a company is and an HR is like, why are we addressing this? Why do we feel like we need to say this? Because everyone's alcohol use should be their personal use. But what happens is because it affects people in your environment, it needs to be addressed. And then I also coach clients on the cultural readiness of how you would talk about that. So if you are a culture that is, more based in wellness and is used to having these options, that's one conversation. But if you are a company like maybe it's rooted in sales and you've always done these things and also always had a lot of alcohol, that conversation or that message is going to be nuanced
Hmm.
to the point
Yeah.
where, how do we start to address this, but not put like this mandatory, no alcohol whatsoever, then people, so it's a disconnect. So it's figuring out where to have those conversations and, entering into that space in a way that feels right for the client and the company.
Well, speaking of entering into that space, can you maybe identify a practical first step that a company can take to start changing that culture at their event?
A practical first step. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat from Lauren and I got, data. Yes. Um, Practical first steps are, I love, this is one of the ones that I always say is, how like for galas or larger events, you're asking people what are your, choices on the menu? Do you want beef? Do you want chicken? Are you vegetarian? Like that is just commonplace. And I have suggested ask your people, do you, prefer non-alcoholic options? And this gets to the data point that Lauren just posed is that even prior to going into an event, you can see where people have their preferences, and it's almost an anonymous way to like note how many people in your organization are coming to your event actually want NA, because the numbers can be very tricky after the event because you can look and see all these people chose alcohol, but it's maybe because they didn't feel permission to choose the NA, but just by doing that first little step, you're saying, yeah, we're probably going to serve it. You're going to have this option. And then you see the numbers post event reflect that initial conversation and offering.
Got it. Well, I know that as somebody who's hosted a number of events, and I've been requested to come up with clever ways of even reminding people of being mindful. It was finding fun ways of kind of making them laugh, but it actually stuck with them. And the one from a recent event that I have to just bring up because people came up to me afterwards at like the events and said like, that stuck with us. We love that. It says like, think the vibe is memorable, not regrettable.
That's so good. Can I use that? Did you trademark that?
You can have that one, but that's it.
Love it. Well, and I
Uh,
think that goes to our earlier conversation too about what not to say. So I shared the script about what you could say, but I've been at events where like the MC the entire night as we're kind of getting through this celebratory awards celebration, they are saying, "Oh, it's almost time to hit the bar. It's almost time. Just hold on a little longer." And just that culture of just encouragement and I still see quite a bit. So just to be mindful of how far really good language can go.
yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we've joked with event planners of, like we can make an open bar joke, but maybe let's stick to one or two,
Mhm.
because then it kind of gets tired and it just assumes everyone is a huge drinker, which,
Mhm.
they're not, and you're essentially encouraging them or creating the space for that. So this is so interesting, and I know that your deck that you have to sort of create a special one with more text on what you spoke from your notes will be available to our viewers after the fact in their follow-up email after the webinar. And of course, if you're interested in learning more from Jen or about designing inclusive events with mindful drinking lens, we encourage you to visit to contact your Prestige account manager for more information, because it sounds like, Jen, you've got a lot to offer. And of course, you have that website where they can go and read more about what you do.
Yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn, and Doug's in the chat. Thank you everyone for being here. It's such an important conversation, and you are the leaders in these spaces. So I'm excited to chat more with any of you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to actually getting that deck myself and looking over some of that, because as someone who's working in a different part of that space, it's always good to think about how to encourage a better culture, even from the stage.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much for being here, Jen. And I want to thank everyone for being here today, because this was certainly a very unique subject that I think really applies to a lot of people's concerns. Now, next month on April 9th, we will be having Tim Altbaum from Vario Productions joining us, and he'll be speaking on the pre-production advantage, how the best events are won before load-in. And Tim has spoken before and always has some really interesting things up his sleeve. And to check out our entire schedule, and as we're continuing building up for the remainder of the year, you can go to the QR code, which I'm going to post full screen in a second, where you can see your schedule. And I also encourage you to reach out to your Prestige contact if you've got an idea for a webinar, or perhaps you're a subject matter expert who would like to share something. We're always looking for more ideas to fill out what we've got going on. Until April 9th, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I'm excited to see you all when we join you all with Tim Altbaum from Vario. Have a great day, everybody.